So Vinnie, how did you end up in Singapore as a VC, and why Singapore, why Asia?
That's the $1 million question I get asked a lot. So I actually ended up in Singapore after backpacking a year across Asia with my wife, Christine. This was back in 2010. So being a geek, just really interested in tech ecosystems. We were both living in San Francisco. I did 2 startups there. While I was traveling around, I would look up events. So I'd go to meetup.com, I'd check out tech blogs, and I basically went to dozens of events across dozens of countries, all with just pure entertainment interest of what's going on here, kind of meet some interesting people. I met tons of interesting people. Singapore really stood out. The first night I arrived here, actually, went to an event at Hackerspace at Victoria Street, their old location. And it was just phenomenal to me in terms of the people I met that day. It's amazing what I've now done with them a few years later. And that wasn't one event. There ended up being a few other events, and I ended up throwing my own event, Super Happy Dev House here. So basically over a year of just pure backpacking, intention to go back to San Francisco. I met probably over 100 startups across China, Southeast Asia, and India, and decided that there's a lot of opportunity on the ground in Southeast Asia, yet really, really raw in early days and not a lot of investors. I'd done 2 companies. I thought back in my mind, angel investing, doing investing at some point in the future, but didn't really have a goal of setting up a fund. It was purely a problem solution. I met a lot of startups. Everyone said, "How do I raise money?" And then light bulb went off. Maybe I can kind of pool some money from the valley with partners. So not just me, but maybe we can pool some money in the valley and invest it here. And that's how Golden Gate Ventures started. And that's why I'm in Singapore.
Fantastic. So yeah, it's the backpacking story.
Yeah. I think that the best thing is for anything, it's just basically going in without any preconceived notion and just taking whatever comes your way, and jumping at that opportunity.
Perfect. And let's talk about Golden Gate Ventures and the companies you've invested in. Can you give us some companies that did and did not work out, and why?
Okay. So we haven't had any companies that have fallen completely flat yet. We're investing it will happen. We've been investing for 3 years, so it will probably happen this year or next year, depending on how long they last. So without naming companies, I can say some companies that we can tell that they're not going to be able to raise the next round. And so I'll start with on the kind of bad or negative side. What we basically try to do is give them a soft landing, which means an acquisition, probably nothing too high. If it's a valley, a soft landing for a company could be like a $10 million acquisition by Google because they want to hire really awesome engineers and they'll pay $10 million for a 6-person engineer team. So here we're kind of looking for something different. So generally looking at corporates, looking at large partners, and so that's to me what I strive for in a worst case scenario of a company they haven't hit on something where they can really get to the next level.
Perfect.
And we try to work with them before that, but when that happens, then
great. There's an exit strategy anyway in place.
Always.
Yeah.
And it becomes a wonderful story. Nobody knows that it was from something negative. Everybody sees exit and may or may not know the price. And that's generally always a good thing. I've gone through that myself, so it generally is a good thing.
And in terms of founders, what are some observations of founders in this region? How are they different to founders elsewhere?
So, I get that question asked a lot. I think it this way, because that question to me, I think comes with the perspective that there's founders in Silicon Valley, and those people are special and magical, and then there's less than that magic anywhere outside the Valley. The reality is, 51% of all founders in the Valley were born outside the U.S., so they're not from the Valley. What the Valley is a magnet. It attracts the best and the most talented people from around the world and puts them into a cauldron and makes them work really, really hard and compete with each other and spit somehow. So that's a really amazing quality that the Valley has. So the reality is, you look at any city, New York City, Singapore, Detroit, Paris, the number of amazing founders at a density of 10,000 people, might be 1 or 2. It just happens in Silicon Valley that it's, 2,000 out of 10,000 because everybody, the best of the best, put themselves there. So when I look at Singapore, I don't see a difference in founders here than anywhere else. We as a fund are looking for that, 1 in 10,000. We keep a lot of stats on all the deals we see. We invest in less than 1% of the deals that we see. So I'm saying no 900 times a year to companies, and it's not a bad thing. It's just maybe no right now. It's not you, it's me. So yes, I don't see any difference in founders where I think that rarity of founders is universal. It just happens in the valley as a high density because people transplant themselves. And that's one great thing. That's maybe another reason why I'm in Singapore. This is a place where people transplant themselves. There's not that many places in the world with such a diverse crowd. You just look around the room. To me, that's innovation. That's where magic happens. People with different backgrounds, different perspectives come together, and it's a team thing, and see something differently because of their backgrounds. So there's few places in the world that have that international flavor, and Singapore is one of them. That's not at all why I looked at a list and said I'm going to be here, but in hindsight, after it probably took me 2 years for that really to click, I can see that as being something that's really important for innovation. And I hate that word innovation.
It definitely is a melting pot. And in terms of sourcing deals, how are you doing it at the moment, and what are your biggest challenges around sourcing deals?
Sourcing deals. So being everywhere at once. So there's a team of 6 of us now, and basically we travel around constantly. This year alone, I don't know, we're halfway through the year. It's probably been every other week I've been in a different country. Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. That goes the same for my partner Jeff, or Michael, everybody in the team. So that's how we're finding deals, is basically putting ourselves in different places. This is where VC is very different in the Valley. In the Valley, there's one road, Sand Hill Road, and that's where all the VCs are. I mean, there's some boutique VCs off of there. There's some in San Francisco, which is cool. The VCs in San Jose, don't ever visit those. You wouldn't want to be a VC in San Jose. That's not a good sign. But so Sand Hill Road is this one road. Everybody comes to you, and all the partners or all the associates, everybody in the partnership has lunch there. They never leave the office. There's no coffee outside. That's rarely happens. It's all at their office on Sand Hill Road. That's where VC in this part of the world is incredibly different. We're not the only fund that's traveling around like mad. On this jungle, all these guys are in multiple countries. Putting them down is really, really difficult. But that's what we need to do in order to find good deals. And then when we're in the countries, we do a variety of things. We try to get involved with events, speaking, judging, Echelon, Tech in Asia, mentoring, accelerators. I've been a mentor with JFDI since the beginning. It's a fantastic accelerator. That's really, really valuable for me to spend time with teams. It's been less and less as the years gone by because I'm spread so thin. But to get to know founders in a not on the other side of the table when you're pitching me is probably the best thing I can do to really build up a relationship with founders. And vice versa, I think that's also the best thing. It's not your friends with the VC, so they're going to invest in you, but does this VC see you growing, see you challenging yourself, and see you taking feedback, even if it's not from them, customer feedback, and applying creative solutions to it? That's going to be a very helpful thing.
Mm-hmm. And if you can change how you manage your deal flows without any cost, what would you change? Is it the logistics part of it? Is it the face-to-face element, or?
Face-to-face is so important. I use Skype all the time, and it's not Skype. Any video conferencing just sucks, especially around the region when you're talking to somebody in Vietnam or Indonesia and slow internet. So face-to-face is so valuable. I love to travel, so I'm not asking that to change, but that's why I have to travel so much. What would I change? The thing that I feel bad about, and if anybody's pitched us and hasn't heard, we try to be quick with our we have interest or we don't have interest. If we met with you, more than twice, we try to give feedback of why. If it's a quick, we don't have interest, maybe you're building a startup for London, I get pitches like this, I'm building a startup for London, traveling through Singapore, can we meet? And that's no, because we're only investing in Southeast Asia, that's a quick no. But if we have met, and it's been at least 2 meetings, we try to give detailed feedback of what we thought. That doesn't mean it's right, it's not saying you have to do this, but that's kind of why we made a pass. But the reality is, we don't always get no's back to everybody in a timely manner, and that's what I would change or improve on our side.
I'm sure founders would appreciate that. And in terms of Southeast Asian startups, what advice would you give startups in this region to go global? How would they compete with the US market and their sophisticated customer base?
I don't know if you're going to get it. I wouldn't compete with the US market and the US company. If you are, I would go to the US. So that's the best. To compete with the US market, you have to be there. To compete with the startups in the US from here, yes, there are exceptions to the rule, and there are startups that are doing that, but the reality is you have to be there. Pretty much the founders have to be there to do anything in the US. Trade code, you guys have customers and everything in the US, but the reality, if you're saying, I want to compete head on with anybody that is doing this now, you're going to need to be there. Otherwise else you're just at a disadvantage. So what I tell startups here in Southeast Asia is basically make a decision early on. Are you building something for the US or are you building something for Southeast Asia? We've invested in both companies. We've helped companies move to the US, like Nitrous, very early on. It was an international team, American, Indian, Korean. Sounds like a joke, they walked into a bar, but they met here in Singapore, started a company together, ended up saying the US is our audience and we want to move there. And they still have half their engineering team here in Singapore, so it's not that they just left completely. They expanded and then hired more people. But they went to the US very early on, the founders, they were like living out of an Airbnb while they were pitching investors, and we had committed to them and we're making intros. So that's on one extreme, it's just get there early. Or the other is focus on Southeast Asia, and there's huge amounts of value here. You mentioned Carousel, Redmart, another company, Kodo Payments, which is in Indonesia and Malaysia doing mobile payments. To me, I'm here, so why did I move here? It's for the opportunity that's here. So I really break it down to either it's the US, move there from day one, or just focus here. And then at some point you can be a big enough company that you can go to other regions. US maybe your next region, maybe East Asia, Japan, Korea is in it, Australia, Europe. There are other places you can expand to, but generally you have to get your core market. Like look at US companies. By the time they come out of the US, they're really, really freaking mature. They're not doing that in their first year or their second year. So you don't have to either the other way around. You can't spread yourself that thin as a young company. When you're big, you can, but not right now.
And what do you foresee happening in Southeast Asia in the next 3 to 5 years in the tech scene? Is it a big exit?
We've had some big exits. So recent big exits, non-stock gains, 100 million by the makers of Candy Crush, like 6 months ago. Luxola, Lexi, her company was acquired by Louis Vuitton. I don't know the price, I would have to imagine it's a decent exit. So what I would imagine is, yes, there'll be bigger exits, but what's more exciting to me is it's not the exits. It's companies that are raising a shit ton of money. So Grab Taxi, Tokopedia, these sort of companies I think are much more meaningful to what's going to be happening in the region, less so than exits. So I really am gauging the health of the ecosystem because it's so young. If you have an exit now, it's naturally going to be low. The ecosystem's only been thriving for less than 3 years. So how would you have a giant exit in less than 3 years? WhatsApp was $1 billion. I forget, that was 8 or 10 years it was around for. Like people kind of think that, it just came out of the corner. Yes, that does happen. Again, there are exceptions to the rule, but most big exits with a lot of value are around for more than 5 years. So the ecosystem is too young to have those big exits. So what I'm really interested in is the companies that are raising 100 million or more as we see that increase. So we're actually going to be publishing some data later this week. We're going to basically crunch numbers for the past 15 years across Asia to basically compare deal flow from a VC side, from a startup side, the number of startups raising Series A money of at least $1 million for the past 10 to 15 years. And what we found out is Southeast Asia looks like China in 2005. So it's basically, I'm not saying Southeast Asia is going to be China, but to give an idea of where we are on some ecosystem scale, it's like China in 2005, and it's like India in 2009, 2010. So if anybody's had any exposure to either of those markets, that can kind of give you an idea of where Southeast Asia is now. And for me, that's amazing. I feel like I'm getting in on the ground floor. And so any entrepreneur in this audience should also feel really excited because you're also getting in the ground floor. You're building, well, maybe I don't know, I should know this, like when the giants, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, but it would have been maybe like a year before 2005, maybe a little older or right around there. So this is really early days, but all the numbers point up.
Yeah, and what are some major barriers to innovation in Southeast Asia? Is it the culture, the risk-averse culture, or is it funding, lack of?
So I don't see a barrier. I said I don't like the word innovation. To me, innovation is actually, the word makes it sound like it's this big aha moment, a bunch of researchers sitting in a lab and like talking stuff out for weeks and then using a whiteboard and all of a sudden, bam, there's innovation. To me, it's actually these really small iterative steps that you don't even notice. It's only in hindsight that something looks innovative. Google wasn't the first search engine, Facebook wasn't the first social network, but when you look back historically, you just kind of ignore everything else that was happening and all the small steps that they took to get to where they are. So to me, innovation is just small steps, and there are a lot of very fast, small steps happening in this region, so I do not see a barrier.
And a more systemic related question.
And I would throw that, I'll just say, when we do the Q&A, if anybody has seen barriers, please throw that out so we can discuss.
Yeah. What is tech's responsibility for wider societal relevance? Are companies like Uber and Airbnb actually creating sustainable employment?
Of course. Because you're saying because it's short-term jobs or whatever. So there's two sides of that argument there. The question was sustainable employment. So I guess people will have different opinions. I would have the opinion that from a, when my parents, or before I was born, like a company like IBM would never fire people. So that was sustainable employment. You work for them, you do there for life. I worked at IBM right out of college. They basically axed like 6,000 jobs and then hired 6,000 kids out of college at like a third of the price. So to me, even the big companies don't give long-term guaranteed employment. So I think this is a new world, and I think it was the anomaly, this idea that you work for this giant corporation and you're there for the rest of life. I think the regular way that the world has worked for thousands of years is people have been pretty independent, doing their own things, whether it's a blacksmith, a farmer, whatever it is. So I think the natural order is kind of going back towards that. Not everything's going to be like that, but so it's this more independent freelance society. But it's a double-edged sword. On one side, you have freedom to live how you want to live, do what you want to do, work the way you want to work. On the other side, yeah, you don't have the benefits and the pension, but we're also seeing that a lot of those benefits and those pension plans that were sold are also like negatively affecting societies and economy, 5 or 6 years ago when the shit hit the fan. So I think it's a good thing. I have to imagine there's people with very opposite opinions, but I think what they're doing is creating lots of jobs. They might be short term, but there's still people working their jobs, and there's a lot of people, whether it's, I don't even know if Uber and Airbnb is the best example, maybe like a freelance Odess network of people just creating their own lifestyle, doing what they want to do. To me, that's a good thing.
Let's open the questions up to the audience. Does anyone have any questions?
For a four-man team, what are the critical roles that you propose for the four-man people? It does funding? Is it important enough to be one-man job?
Is what important enough to be one-man job?
In charge of funding.
Oh, to raise money?
Yes.
Yeah. Whoa, sorry. I think that generally is going to have spill-off, but generally the CEO is the one man doing all the time. The fact is, fundraising sucks. I've done it twice for a startup. I've done it twice for a fund. It sucks no matter what side you're on. It's much harder on the startup side. I have empathy for you, everybody here. So it's a full-time job, and that's kind of why you want it to be a one-man job, because if you throw 4 people at it, it's 4 full-time people, and you want the company to still be going. So the reality what ends up happening is like company growth does slow when you're fundraising, especially in those early stages. So I think limiting it to one person in terms of the deck, reaching out to people. Like your co-founder should be involved, or whoever ends up being the one. The co-founder should definitely be involved with their contacts, coming to some meetings. A lot of those initial meetings, cold emails, and you have to cold email for fundraising. Cold emails, follow-up emails, that should really come down to one person's plate, because it's full time. For like 2 to 3 months.
Okay, I mean, what are the critical roles for a startup? Funding, technical, business.
I think the components of what makes up a startup, what's the perfect team structure, and what would the scope be?
There's no perfect team structure. Yeah, there's no ideal structure. For me, I like to see more than one person. I like to see 2 or more founders. Probably 2 or 3 founders. Getting to 4, then that's on a little higher side. But there's no structure. I don't look for that. I would just, what I negatively would say is, if it was like 5 founders, I'm probably gonna be a little skeptical of like, why is everybody a founder? Like, step up. And if it's 1 founder, they're incredibly successful 1-founder companies. But the reality is, I also look at it, starting a company, if you're a first-time young entrepreneur, starting a company is so stressful and you go through these ups and downs. 1, it's really nice to be able to like, shoot the shit with your other co-founders over beers and go through those ups and downs. That's 1. 2, if you can't convince somebody else on your idea, then it's gonna be hard to convince me as an investor. I want to see that buy-in of people giving it all up because they have belief. One of the companies that, just as an example, we recently invested in, it was announced Grana. So it's a new fashion brand, Australian. They have a pop-up store on Orchard Road, really great quality fabrics. One of the reasons why I invested in it was the co-founder story. So basically it's this one Australian who started it, came up to Hong Kong, so he's by himself. He starts pitching some angel investors when it's really at the concept stage. He gets connected to a young investment banker, like mid to late 20s, who's been doing some angel investing. The investment banker here's the idea, he's like, wow, I love this, I want to invest, you know what? I'm gonna start helping out nights and weekends. He ends up taking a 2-week vacation, and it wasn't to go travel to Bali or something, it was to work full time at Grana and to get it off the ground. It was just him, and so then the 2 co-founders. And at the end of the 2 weeks, he went back, it was a big investment bank, he's like, I quit, I'm gonna be working on this. And I loved that when I heard that story. So again, the 2 or more founders is not a requirement, but I'd like to see that. But there's no rules. That's the best thing I can say. There's 0 rules in starting a company. You're gonna do things that you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. I've done it. I love this space. It's where like young people can change things. I feel like I'm getting out of it. Like how many people here use Snapchat? Okay, so everybody under like 23. I even feel too old to really understand Snapchat, but like I'm using one. I don't have any friends. I'm 35. I don't have any friends my age that use it, so that's one reason why I like lose out. But so my point being is that this industry, a lot of it is social and it's behavioral and it's changing, it's evolving, communication, how we interact, all these things. Even though you might be really, really experienced, as somebody who's young and inexperienced but has been growing up on the internet, growing up on Facebook, growing up on these platforms, you have different perspectives. You have the ability to build something new that none of us who have the experience and have been doing it for a longer time than you would see. And I love that. To me, that's so disruptive. And so that's why there's no rules. The rules are constantly being changed, constantly being pushed. So just do.
Evolving secret sauce. Yep.
Vinnie, just now you mentioned a CTO should do the pitching, right?
Sorry, I was just saying one person. So CEO, Chief Executive Officer, and that would be the other good thing for mixing a team. A CTO, like you should have a CTO. If you're a single CTO, great, or a CEO and CTO.
Yep.
Sorry, Vinnie, you worry that there isn't enough engineering talent in Singapore to kind of propel our startups to the level where we see like Tel Aviv, the Valley, New York, or let's say Tokyo?
I think the ability to hire great engineers probably feels more difficult in the Valley than it does here, so I'm not worried about that. So that's another thing people think. Again, there are so many great engineers in the Valley, but there's so many great companies. You're competing. So for my last company, you know how I hired engineers? It wasn't in the Valley. So people in the US still use Craigslist for job postings. We would go and look at these small little cities in the Midwest, on the East Coast, like not even major cities, and look for people that were posting their resumes, like really good developers. Most of them, one, had never even thought about moving out to the Valley, and two, because they're in these like smaller cities and not really grinding their teeth on in a density of other developers, they didn't even think that they had the ability to get to San Francisco, so they didn't even apply. But for us, it was a great source. We found some really great people that way. So my point being, it's incredibly hard to find engineers in the Valley, 'cause it's so competitive. You're competing with all the startups, and then you're competing with Google and Facebook and all these people that just pay enormous amounts of money. So that's probably the most difficult place in the world to hire engineers, which is counterintuitive. That being said, finding good engineers is a problem around the world. I just got on a relative scale. I don't think Singapore is any worse than somewhere else. But finding good engineers is universally a difficult problem for good ecosystems.
What's the craziest thing that the startup has ever done to teach you?
So one startup, more of just when I was in Japan, it was a travel-related startup, and so I'm very fond of them, and then ended up introducing them to their investor. Took me to go see sumo wrestling practice. So like that was something kind of just interesting, cool. One thing I will, only because Peter Sequoia shared it with me during Tech in Asia startup speed dating, it was something that was very creative. He said the startup sat down, the founders, and they had like 100 sheets. It was white paper with like big black text on it, and they didn't say anything. They just sat down and they started picking up almost like cue cards, and it was like questions and answers, and had Peter reading things out loud. And basically, he got pitched just by like reading to himself and answering some questions, and that was the whole thing. They didn't say a word. I thought that was kind of creative. But that's the thing, you can only do that once, so you need to think of different things. The reality though is that I'm not, in different investors and things, I'm not swayed. There's no, again, I shared the story about Katrina, like knowing the founders and how they got together really swayed my opinion. It wasn't that they wooed me and did something, and anything that's gonna work against, because we're all human beings. And think about it, if somebody's coming on too strong, your defenses automatically go up. So I generally would avoid that because it's going to make our spider senses go up. Yes.
Do you invest in IoT?
Internet of Things, yes. So we invest in anything that touches the internet. So any hardware that touches the internet. We actually invested in Vibes, which is a vibrator that hooks up to your smartphone. It's doing really well. So yeah, as long as it touches the internet, we will look at it. There needs to be something about Southeast Asia. For him, he's from Indonesia. He went through an accelerator in China, got a co-founder in the US. So and again, having that footprint, has a co-founder in the US and is hitting on a global market. So that's what I'm saying for us. We'll look at something that's global or US, but there needs to be that strong founder presence there.
What type of startups are you looking at in Vietnam?
Everything. So we've done a few investments. The only one that's been announced so far is Avatar, which is the mobile platform. We're looking at a lot of web, mobile marketplaces, content plays. We have 2 startups from Vietnam in the pipeline right now, one that we're leading and one that we've committed to.
Such as,
Hi, Samir. Thanks for hosting us. Just a question about your job as a VC. I was wondering what kind of question or issues do entrepreneurs that you invest in come up to you with? In terms of scaling, in terms of like just what they face?
Everything. So one, I'm always trying to draw out what are your problems. For me, I have a background in building things, so a lot of times if it's early on, I'm talking to startups about growth or retention. Again, it's a two-way conversation. It's not like your retention sucks next. It's kind of like your retention sucks, but you're onto something. If you spent a little time on that, you'd see a curve. And that was Carousel. So Carousel, I met them, their retention was horrible, but spent time with them and worked on retention. So problems are across the board. I just met another startup. He was the CEO is in town from Indonesia, who's only here overnight. He came over to my apartment last Friday night, and we had, like a really informal, intimate, just chat about his company, his goals, his strategy, where he wanted to go, who he was talking to for his next round of fundraising. So it was kind of literally like strategy for the next 2 to 3 years for the company in terms of, I was even suggesting like some product lines to be discontinued, so it can get that deep, and it's a combination of, what I guess I know or can speak to comfortably, and then a combination of how much the entrepreneur, it's about trust. And so, when you're a CEO, obviously you're aggressive, you're building a company, you're pushing it forward, you're coming across like 110% as you should. And so there's always a line of, for some CEOs, you can quickly see it's really difficult to build up that trust and relationship. They just kind of blow you off like, I know everything, and I don't know everything, but we've invested in 25 companies, I built companies, so I love this job. Every day I'm learning. I'm constantly learning. It kind of seems like VCs know all this stuff. No, we are learning from our CEOs, from our portfolio, and so we can apply X to a different company. So that is, with this whole problem, this is what I'm facing, what I'm trying to gauge is, what does this relation feel like, and do they show respect for others, for me, for answers? I could be wrong, but at least we're having a good conversation.
So Vinnie, I think we have a number of corporates or people still in their day jobs, and one question is how do big corporates actually play a part in this whole startup game? How can they help out or be in touch in the scene, and how can they give back to the startup space? So I think this is a question that you want to know as well. Can corporates take part in this?
Anybody really high up at a corporate somewhere? Show of hands. I saw one hand.
You don't like the word innovation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I generally, it's like choose. So one, there's many ways to help, but the reality is the businesses look and behave and operate so differently that. So how to help? I would say one, investing, but the reality is a lot of corporates invest with a certain strategy in mind, which tends not to look like VC investing. So a good example of a really good corporate investor, Rakuten Ventures, same name. So I don't know if people know him here, but he's definitely really well respected. He has the background, he was working at Google before this, now he needs a fund by Rakuten. So that's a corporation that started their own VC fund, and I would say has been doing a really good job. So one way is to start an investment arm and try to be like a VC fund, which means like terms that are very market friendly, moving very quickly. So that's one way to help. There's a lot of corporate accelerators popping up. That when there's a lot of them, that makes it it's not like the ecosystem can handle like tons of them. So that becomes difficult, but where I think corporates can really help is then if there are existing accelerators, rather than starting a new one, basically running an accelerator is probably the most heartless, heart giving thing. Like, you really don't make any money operationally. It's such a cash loss to actually run the operations of it. That what they really need is sponsorship and investors in the background. So again, as a corporate, I think supporting then you can either direct invest in the company, or you could invest in an accelerator through just like a sponsorship, but like help them put beer and coffee on the table and run their operations. And then this is where corporates are really, really helpful. Donate people, mentors in their time, and build up those relationships. So I would say putting money into the ecosystem is probably a good thing. Mentoring time, so JFDI, Founders Institute, that's a good thing. And then this is really difficult, like opening up partnerships. But the reality is for a big corporation to partner with a startup is really, really difficult. part of the reason why I look, again, going back to the word innovation, and a lot of corporations say, we want innovation, we want to work with startups. So innovation, two things, small steps. The other thing about innovation is risk, enormous amounts of risk. When you're 22 years old, you can take enormous amounts of risk. When you're IBM and been around for 100 years and have shareholders, you can take very little risk. And that's where things don't match up. So that's where I see a really, really huge disconnect, is that you can't be innovative if you're not taking risk. And a corporation can't take big risk with their brand. I've seen corporations do interesting things. Telenor, big telco in Norway, they own like half the telcos in this region. They spun out some kind of workplace app, maybe it's like real-time communication something, but they did something really creative. They basically, their innovation team, that was 6 people that were working on it, but they didn't brand it Telenor. They just made it, put it out in the App Store if it was their own. And they built and gained traction off that. That's really great, because if it would have went out with like Telenor's name, then Telenor's communication boards would have to like look at the copy that's going out, and people would have been testing and Q&A and all this sort of things, and it would have just killed it or made the app less of what it is. So I think if you have the ability as a corporation to somehow create a side vehicle that doesn't use your corporation's name, that would allow you to take risk.
Hi, Vinnie.
Yep.
What's the best way of getting a good mentor in Singapore without doing an accelerator?
I email people. Yeah, so like look up on LinkedIn, Angel List, find CEOs. There needs to be some it's a two-way relationship, so they should be getting some benefit out of it in terms of learning from you also whatever you're working on. So accelerators are a really great way to get that. The hub, if you're a member of the hub, there's a mentor network here. So there's tons of formal programs, but if you didn't want to do that, I would just say just start cold emailing people, looking up skill sets on LinkedIn and AngelList.
I'll connect you.
So the only things I will spend time with now is our portfolio and a few mentoring relationships that I've, been part of for a while. But unfortunately, so you have to get into our portfolio.
Yeah.
Vinnie, how do you the VC culture over here in Asia, say the US or Europe, how is the ecosystem in the VC environment?
Good question. How's the VC environment different here than like the Valley? So it's vastly different. The VC environment in the Valley has been going on for decades. VC is actually really young. People don't even think this. It's maybe like 60 years old. Like it was something that was invented that VC didn't necessarily exist. So it's been evolving. Like things like convertible notes, which everybody's familiar with. Like that didn't exist in the 80s, and that kind of came out with the whole like tech startup ecosystem and angel investors coming in like the early 90s. So keeping that in mind, maybe that helps me in a perspective of VC is constantly evolving and changing. And because of that, the Valley is really at the forefront of that, and everything else would naturally be trailing because we're not there, communication and differences. So like things that make VC harder here, it's not, I didn't do VC in the Valley, so I have friends that are VCs in the Valley, so I'm even, I don't have apples to apples to compare. But like vendor networks, like for me to find a good lawyer here that understands employee stock option, liquidation preferences, all these, an accounting firm, like all of these things that you have in the Valley because it's been around for decades and it's attracted these third-party vendors and it can be helpful and move things forward. That's just getting off the ground here, so that makes it slower. So there's an example of who uses Slack. I fucking love Slack. It's like cheap, but like it's so good. I think it's like a Canadian co-founder. So they tried to raise money in Canada, and all the VCs there said no. And so they went to the Valley, and some of the VCs said yes. And so I was just talking to some government policy people and banks in Canada. It's like we have to change VC. So the reality is that if you're a VC in Canada, you're going to be less risk-taking than a VC in the Valley. Just like me out here in Singapore, as much risk as I want to take, I'm going to be less risk-taking than somebody in the Valley. And that's something you just can't change. It's not that I like risk, but being out here, there's different conditions and different everything and cultures and countries, and you have to go across multiple regions.
Those present complexities, so then we tend to be a little bit more conservative how we look at deals. So I think the biggest difference is going to be risk, and then the other is, one is kind of setting and pushing the industry forward, and everything else is traveling. The one interesting thing though, what is happening outside the Valley, where the Valley is really trying to figure out, is going back to innovation. Innovation doesn't only happen in the Valley, and that's taken a dramatic change over the past 5, maybe 10 years, where you could just be in the VC in the Valley and everybody came through your door. So that's the one thing I think VCs now, and there's many partners that have been doing this for years, much higher than me, that want to do calls every once in a while just to like learn what's going on here. And it's because, yeah, they're at a disadvantage for anything that's going on outside in the world. And some VCs have been very proactive. Sequoia, opening up China and India and having people here in Singapore. So that's an example of an amazing VC saying, we're going out in the world and that's the new model. Not everybody's gonna come to us, not everybody's building something in the Valley, but there's still opportunity. 85 to 90% of VCs still have to catch up to that. So while there's a lot I'm learning from the Valley, and other VCs are learning from the Valley, there's a lot of VCs looking to what's happening in other parts of the world, and how do I understand that?
I just started looking for a technical co-founder to build an app. Could you give me some pointers on what qualities I should look out for?
Where? So go to the list.sg and then go to the calendar and look at all the tech events that are happening. There's a Women in Python meetup, I think, happening this week. So I go to all the startup around there, I would assume there should be some techies here, but there's definitely, you go to the programming language meetups. You may not understand what's being said, but just be interesting. So yeah, no, you're not going to meet somebody and say, hey, this is my great idea, you want to work on it. You need to become friends with them first, most likely. So you have to start going to events without the idea of, I'm looking for a wife, and it's just more of just in the dating scene, kind of seeing what's going on, who do I click with, can date a few at once. Yeah.
Qualities?
Qualities? Do you get along with each other? That's hopefully they're technical. So assuming that they're technical, do you get along with each other? And that's why there's no programming language. It's not like we invest in Python and not PHP. The reality is, like, some programming languages are really great, Python and Ruby. Others are terrible, .NET and stuff like that. But there's a startup we're looking at in Thailand that's doing .NET, and the reality is, and had an intimate conversation with the CTO. CTO and CEO have worked together for a long time. That's what the CTO knows. That's who's in his network. That's who he can hire for, and that's a good enough reason for me. So I'm not going to say you need to change your platform, which I think and then we did have this conversation. If we invest, we're not saying he needs to change, but the reality is he's going to need to change at some point in order to grow and scale and do things. But I really appreciate somebody who says, this is what I know, I can build something, I have respect in this field, I have a network where I can hire people, and then let's see where we can take this before we go in any direction.
Hi. Outside of your initial co-founders, outside the initial co-founders, in terms of hiring, initial outsider employees, do you have any kind of do's and don'ts? Maybe if you should be offering equity in the company or maybe not.
Great question. I'm very much from the mentality of everybody that's an early employee should be offering equity. I think the much better question is see what they ask for, because you want people that come to the table asking for equity and understand what that means. So I think the idea of giving out equity to most employees that are coming on early on, that's common, but you really should be, that's almost a filter. Are they asking for equity or not? If they're not, so this also ties into fire fast. There's the old adage of hire slowly, fire fast. It's a bad person in a company can just culturally take the whole company. If they're unhappy, they're not fitting in. So it could be because technically they're not up to speed with everybody else, and then they become unhappy and they feel too much pressure, and then they start bitching. And so you want to if there's not a good fit, you want to figure that out really, really early. So it's, I guess, one good rule of thumb. But the idea of giving out equity, I think that's a really good thing to do, and you'd want to be looking for people that are looking to understand that about it.
Could you share with us some of the criteria of things that you are looking for and things you are avoiding?
Okay. Looking for growth, so traction. We don't invest in an idea on the back of a napkin. I think people have this concept that people in the valley do, and they don't. Again, there's exceptions to the rule, but 80% or more startups, and I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but I think it's true, have a product built and have traction before getting funding in the valley. The cases where they don't, they probably have built something successful before and have that network to tap on investors. So the most exciting thing for me to invest in, I look at it this way. Investors, we're just really, we have our own judgments, but we're really bad to say, that is the great idea, that is going to be $1 million idea. We don't know that. But what we can see is, wow, you're growing, or the average user uses that 20 minutes per session, they come back 4 times a day. And so that's why I look at anything in the internet, and I just want to see those stats. And are you showing growth, or are you showing, if there's no growth, are you showing some other metric that shows high engagement, and maybe there's something missing for growth, and we can talk that out. So that's hands down. In terms of what I would shy away from, so call me risk averse, like things that are really competitive. I want to see a little competition. If you're the only, if I say who's your competition and you say nobody, I'm not investing in you. You're too early to the market. If nobody else has realized the potential, you're too early to the market. So I want to see a little competition. But when there's a lot of competition and there's a really big player, that's something that usually will make a pretty quick pass on. I would say where there's a lot of competition, you still have a chance of making something amazing is in China. It's like the way things work, it's super competitive. There are a lot of people, there's different districts, right? And even in India there can be different flavors. But here in this region you have to fight so hard for, if you're starting in Singapore, for such a small audience, and if there's a lot of competition that you have to displace, it's really difficult. So basically I want to see some competition, but if it's just over-mounting and you don't have something that really hits me as yep, you're right, you're looking at this differently, nobody else is, and I can totally see the value there. If you don't have that, then that's a quick pass.
2 more questions.
Can you share a little bit how the Singapore government plays into the local startups? Sorry to talk.
Yeah, Singapore government, so they opened up a checkbook, they've earned $12 billion over the past 5 years. Can't really think of a better thing to be doing than pouring money into the ecosystem. That's a very Singaporean question. Absolutely nothing. Get out of the way, which they are also doing. I'm really impressed. I come from a place in the world where it's government, entrepreneurship, they shouldn't mix. If you pointed me to certain rules and regulations of government programs, I can say that sucks, that's brilliant. So at the micro level, small, minute level, I can definitely, we can talk on it and be that's what I would change, that's what I changed. But at a macro level, I'm super impressed. Just keep it going forward. I trust in faith. So.
Yeah, final question.
Yeah, I'm wondering, have you ever had proposals or invested in anything related to education?
Good question. So that is, I guess there's certain areas that all have a higher bar of, and that would be one because in the US, it's up until just recently, that's in a really difficult space to make any big strides. And so I can't look to the US or China or India and say, here's lots of examples of people again, not getting acquired, but raising lots of money over multiple rounds by great VCs. If I can't point to that, so again, you can just call me simple, but if I don't have that as a base point, then it's hard for me to say, I'm going to take that risk here. So that's the one thing that education has going against it, is that it's only really started making strides for any sort of technology in that space in the US recently. A lot of it's because of regulation and culture and so many other things. And so maybe it does, and then maybe I missed this, maybe it does really take strides, and same with medical records outside the US. But that is something that I'm going to have a much higher bar of really wanting to see what's being changed. And again, if you have growth, whether that's we've gotten these schools on board or we're bottom up and all these students are using it, I'm definitely going to take a look. And I'm making my decision off of growth, but in certain areas where there's not a lot of great examples, it's probably be a little higher bar.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for your insights, Vinny, and thank you to our sponsors, Google and the Hub. Would someone from the Hub like to come up to speak about the Hub?
Actually, I got the Hub then, but I just want to say, big thanks to the Hub again. The Hub is actually moving to a new space. I think you can find more information on the board on the right. It's going to be a bigger place, so it's going to hold more people. And I think we'd like to invite Amit from Google to just say a few words.
I just use this one. Hey, thank you very much. That was a very insightful talk. And I'll just take a segue on one of the questions that actually got asked here, and what are the big corporates doing? I can't speak for all the corporates, but one slide I had sent, if you can just bring it up here. We don't have permissions for that. If you go to Google Startup, just search for that, you'll find it, but I'll just talk through that. So a couple of things that Google does is Google for Entrepreneurs is our group that actually takes care of entrepreneurship. Google itself, coming out from a very garage startup culture, the founders have actually taken it all the way up till now, right? So you see that in everything that we do on a daily basis inside our organization. And we make sure that we are fostering a strong ecosystem and doing lots of things for startups in the region as well as globally. So we have the Google for Entrepreneurs that hosts and partners with programs like Startup Grind, Startup Weekend, and they have lots of partnerships. They also have things like campuses where we have co-working spaces, we have mentorship programs. We just recently opened one in Seoul a couple of months back, and we have been talking to some of the VCs here to actually have some form of partnerships where startups can get exposure to that culture as well. We also take care of diversity. As part of that, we have an initiative like the Campus for Moms, where moms can bring in their little kids, and while they're going through programs, trainings, or just meetups, they'll have babysitters who can take care of that. So there's a lot of stuff that corporates are doing. Plus, we also do things like Google Ventures does investments, Google Capital does investments on late stage. Each of them is working out of different regions. Like we don't have anyone active here, but we have these programs, and at some point they'll find their way into the region as well. Something more actionable for more startups is the program that we have here called Launchpad, which is a collection of a lot of benefits that startups find very useful. So there are benefits that all startups can get, essentially get you quickly started off the ground with your cloud expenses, map expenses, a whole bunch of things, or you can get into something which is the scale stage. So we have a couple of partners here, Golden Gate being one of them. So if you're coming through them, you can come through the scale stage directly and get a lot of benefits. Not just benefits on cloud credits, but things like a UX expert, a Googler or a Google developer expert, spending one-on-one time with you and looking at your application and giving feedback, getting access to a support email. So those things are very valuable as you're taking your company off the ground. So I hope, at least from a Google perspective, I feel good that we are doing a lot of stuff for the entrepreneurs. We do events, meetups, developer summits, a Google for Entrepreneur Week that should start happening in the next quarter. So stay tuned, and we'll be happy to engage with you more often on this stuff as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we want to give a small token of appreciation to Vinny for showing up today and sharing some. Son, the chapter director of Singapore, is here a few words.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming today. This event marked the greatest event so far ever held. I cannot do this without my awesome team. First of all, Katrina too, she's the chair of the Starboy. Walter, he's a business director. If anyone wants to partner with us or sponsors, talk to him. Today I have a special guest, Casey, my wife. Without